Despite what my artistic abilities might make it seem, I am in fact not a toddler with a particularly deep voice. The opposite, actually. I am in fact a full-blown adult. I'm only speaking physically, of course. Mentally, I checked out at the ripe age of 5 when I was told that there is in fact more than 10 numbers. The point of all this is to say that of current, I am not in school. I graduated and swore to never spend another day of my life in a school. It only took an agonizing 6 months of minimum wage retail work to change that. My 13 years in the public education system were a complete joke. In particular, my grade 10 science class. It started off fine. I was in a class with a group of my friends, and while science is without a doubt my least favorite of the 4 core classes, it could have been so much worse. But as the semester went on, I slowly learned to love science and made great memories and learned stuff I would never be able to live without. Just kidding. The third day of classes, our science class got split in half, and naturally, out of my group of friends, I was the only person who got pulled. I got put into Mr. Hydra's class. I won't sit here and lie to you. His class wasn't bad. It was awful. That class was a circus, and I was the clown. His class was laid out like this, and because I still slightly cared about my education at this point, I decided to sit right here, right at the front. Huge mistake, but I'll get into that later. Mr. Hydra liked to keep his class cold, like really cold, which normally wouldn't be all that big of an issue. It's a free country. If this man wants to keep his classroom negative 10 degrees, it can be. We live in Canada. We believe in democracy here. Except, during the winter, when in Alberta it commonly hits below 30 degrees, he still would keep his class freezing cold. It was so cold, I often would just wear my coat to his class. And even still, he'd complain about it being too hot. Meanwhile, I had to start a fire just to not freeze to death. I had Mr. Hydra's class first thing in the morning, and the combination of being there so early in the morning and it being freezing cold made it the optimal place to take a nap. And I wasn't alone in this assessment. At least 60% of the class was asleep every given lesson. Mr. Hydra seemed not to have a care in the world. Whether that was because he just didn't notice, or he just didn't care, I don't know. But despite how much he didn't care, I still fought off the urge to sleep every class, because like I said earlier, I still slightly cared about my education. Except for one morning, after a particularly late night, I finally gave in to the urges, and rested my eyes. But I didn't get the luxury of having a nice peaceful nap like everybody else did. For some reason, Mr. Hydra took me sleeping as a personal slight against him, and he reacted like any good teacher would. He walked up to me and put his hands probably 5 centimeters away from my face and slammed them together as loud as he could. And after that, I learned not to sleep in his class. Despite the fact that everybody else around me would pretty much pull out a pillow and blanket every class, I didn't get to sleep during his class. One day, nearing the end of the semester, while a good probably 4 of us were awake, Mr. Hydra looked at me and said, "Simon, what's the square root of 8? Now, I don't think I need to explain the fact that my name is in fact not Simon, but rather Jacob. I understand the confusion. They are quite similar. They share a lot of the same letters, but unfortunately, I couldn't see the connection. So I didn't respond, thinking he was talking to somebody behind me, but no one responded. So he stepped closer and asked again a little louder, "Simon, what's the square root of 8? Still nothing. At this point, I'm looking around thinking, this Simon fellow must be deaf or something. So he asks again a couple more times, each time getting progressively louder and louder. By the 6th repetition of the question, he's pretty much screaming. Mr. Hydra then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Simon, are you deaf?" It then finally clicked in my head that he was in fact referring to me. So I tell him that in fact my name is not Simon, but rather Jacob. So he finally asked, "Jacob, what's the square root of 8? And at that moment, I decided Mr. Hydra would remember my name. He would remember Jacob as a genius. I put all 6 of my brain cells to work. Smoke was coming out of my ears doing this complex equation. And finally, I got to an answer. And I said that answer with all the confidence I could muster. 6. And it was wrong. But that's okay, because science is for nerds.